Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar. My name is Andrew Townsend. I am the Campaign Marketing Manager here at eLearning Brothers. Today's webinar is going to be about using learning games to boost performance. It's going to be really fun, and I hope everybody can learn what they are hoping to learn as they attend. This session will be recorded. We will email a copy of it out to everybody who has registered later today, and we'll also be posting this on our blog so you can find it there and share it as you wish. If you have questions during the webinar, we'll be ready to answer your questions in the questions panel. That is part of the GoToWebinar control interface there. So just find the questions panel, you can type right in there, and we'll get to as many of your questions as we can. We have people in the wings that are ready to answer those questions directly to you, or we'll bring up those questions with our presenters. Speaking of our presenters, today we have Chris Willis, Director of Product Content with eLearning Brothers, and Stephen Baer, Director of Creative at the Game Agency. Thank you both of you for coming, and without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to both of you.
Well, thanks so much for having us. Really excited to talk about this. We are going to talk, We are going to talk today about mapping different types of games to different types of performance objectives. And it's a really important topic. There we go. All right. Hopefully no more technical glitches on my part. It's a really important topic because often people want to use games, but they ask what games make the most sense. So we wanted to start this off with just a few polls really quickly. So Andrew, if you want to introduce these and launch these, it'd be great.
Sure. So that poll's right on the screen. What's your role in designing learning? Are you a learning experience designer, a learning developer, a learning manager, a business manager, consultant, or maybe you're something else? You know, let us know in the questions panel. And I'm realizing many of you probably wear multiple hats or qualify, count yourself as multiples of these. I apologize, I did not make this multiple select for you to be able to select more than one, but click the one that you think matches how you describe your role in designing learning. Yep. I'll give you guys a couple more seconds here to participate. Looks like that we definitely have two of these in abundance in our audience, and then a couple of the others. As you guys are typing the others, I'll let you know what some of those are. We've got a live trainer wanting to transition to design. We have an L&D specialist, a department of one. Yep, so there's another one of those. All the hats at the same time. All right, we'll close this off and I'll share those results. So 37% of our audience claims or sees themselves as learning developers, 33% as learning experience designers, 19% learning managers, 9% something else, or all of them, I guess, and 2% business manager or consultant.
That's great. And I think that we're going to talk a lot about learning experience design. So hopefully for those of you who are already doing that, hopefully a lot of this will either validate or help you think of some new tools. And for those of you who are not, hopefully we'll give you some insights and ideas for the future. Chris, anything you wanted to cover on this just before we jump to the next poll question?
No, just to reiterate what you said, if you are a learning experience designer or aspiring e-learning experience designer, we hope to give you some insights here that help you break out of that tendency to, okay, I'm going to do a training and now I'm going to put a game at the end to use that as an assessment, because there's nothing wrong with that, but there's just so much more you can do, and we hope we give you some insights and takeaways here to help you move into that direction. So, okay, perfect. One more poll.
So this poll is more about what you guys would like to get out of this session. Obviously, we have a track that we're going to go down, but we can certainly alter it a little bit if we are going in a different direction, or if we can highlight certain things that you'd like to cover.
Yes, because we are presentation experience designers here, so our webinar experience designers, so yes.
All right, so for this one, I was smart and did make it so you can collect more than one. So maybe you just want to learn all three things: deeper instructional design insight, ways to more effectively use games, tips to increase learner engagement, etc. So definitely go ahead and use those. The click right on the screen. Oh, wow, okay. A lot of people participated really fast in this one. We'll close it off in about 5 seconds. All right, closing it out, and here's those results, Chris and Stephen. So 82% would like to see ways to be more effective with their games, and I think from what have been talking about as we prepared for this, I think they're going to definitely get what they're looking for here. 72% of the audience tips to increase learner engagement. Games can do a great deal towards that end, so we'll be talking about that as well. And then 47% deeper instructional design insight, and 2% are wanting, I'm looking at the others in here, how to generate games quickly when you only have limited time. So that's a great thing. So if we can focus a little more energy on ways to effectively use games and tips to increase learner engagement, that would benefit this audience.
I'm excited because I think we can effectively cover all this, and we'll get going. But please, as questions come up, please put them in the chat, and we will address them, along the way. So, okay, so just real quick on the agenda, and Chris, please cut me off if you want to add to this. The first thing is we hear often, "I want to build a game," and this goes back to that 2% from that poll. How does someone build an effective learning game, and how does someone do it fast? We're going to cover that. But I think one of the things that you often need to do is step back and think about, why are you building a game? So we're going to talk about mapping gameplay to your performance or learning outcomes that you desire, because not all games are created equal, and you can use different types of games for different use cases. And then the last thing that we're going to talk about is, we'll probably talk about this throughout, but is how you can utilize games or game-based learning to keep people engaged throughout your learning, and ultimately to drive better retention and keep them coming back to digest your content. And this is really key. And so I'm really excited about this because it's not just in theory, there's lots of data we have on this that I'm excited to share. Okay. So first, I think it's just important to identify or to define what a game is, right? And I want to almost break this up and look at a game, which is a structured form of play, undertaken for entertainment often and fun, but sometimes used for education or other purposes, right? And I want to almost put that in the parking lot for a second and just say that that is a game versus gamification. I often hear those two terms, and I think it's important to define them separately. Gamification, on the other hand, happens to be more about utilizing a lot of the mechanics of gameplay. So that might be points and badges and leaderboards, and applying them to your everyday world. We're not going to be talking about that as much. We're actually going to, we'll cover that just a teeny bit at the end. We're going to talk more about gameplay and games overall, and mapping them accordingly to what you're trying to teach and what you want people to learn. I think it's important to think about a number of things when you look at designing a game, but these are 6 that I always kind of put at the top of my list. So I wanted to just cover this first because I think it's really important to almost have a cheat sheet, if you will, and that's what this is. So the first thing is looking at the story arc, okay? So in some cases, a game's just gonna be a trivia game and there's gonna be no story arc, but on your soft skill games, there's often gonna be identifying who the character is and what scenarios they're in and what environments they're in and what choices the player has to make. And that is, I think, really important to design early and thoughtfully, because when done right, that is what's going to drive a really successful learning outcome, okay? And by the way, you see 2 charts here under story arc. When I think about, as an instructional designer, I think about you have your one that's on the top, this guy right here, that can be really difficult to design and often overwhelming to play because there's so many choices, versus this one right here, which is going to give the player a few choices, but always direct them back in the direction that you want them to go. So I wouldn't call it linear per se, but I would say that it is directing them with choice along the way. Speaking of choice, the second thing is giving them relevant choices, right? So you always want to make sure that the games that you're building feel like a simulation or a practice playground of real life, right? And so you want to make sure that all the choices that you're designing feel like things that could truly happen in the environment, and you want people to think about. So I kind of circled this example over here. Throw coffee on your computer, probably not something that you want to give someone the opportunity to do in real life, or something that you should have them even thinking about. So don't even put that in there. Make sure that you are giving choices that feel really realistic. The next thing is the number of choices. I talk about this one a lot. As I think about my home life with my children and my wife, we spend more time looking at the Netflix catalog of things to watch than we do actually watching. So I think the reality is with too many choices, it becomes overwhelming. So you want to make sure that there are a handful of choices and that someone can dive in quickly. The next thing is realistic voice. You want to make sure that as you're writing your content, it feels like what they would hear contextually in the situation in real life that you are having them simulate, having them play. And so we can talk about that in a lot more detail, but it's really important in my mind, if you're not a subject matter expert, make sure you're bringing somebody in to help you think through that. 2 more to go. So I think feedback is critical. You know, there are ways of doing it right and wrong. I don't feel like that limited amount of feedback is very useful. I feel like you want to make sure that it's contextual feedback and helpful feedback, right? So, you know, it may be if you're in a soft skills environment, maybe it is about, you know, the different ways that someone would actually respond and having someone go down a branch based on those responses. Or maybe if you're in just a regular recall game, and we'll show you some examples of that, it may be more about just corrective feedback. Well, that's not actually correct, and here's why, and this is something you need to be thinking about. But the more feedback you can give, the more helpful it's going to be for somebody. And the last thing I want to just hit upon here is visuals. And we often think about visuals. There are so many ways to go. And quite honestly, I think that they're all important to consider, right? You might want to be going for a very minimalistic look that is not going to call out a particular gender or a particular demographic or a particular culture. That might be really a very conscious decision. You might want to go for a very realistic look that's using video and images. And quite honestly, one of the things we love about working with eLearning Brothers is that they have a huge library of just those assets you can use. You might want to build out, you know, illustrations that are a lot more fun and, you know, just feel a little more whimsical. And so I think that, you know, these choices have to be deliberate, but I think these are all things you should be thinking about. Chris, before I jump on, is there anything else you want to cover here?
You know, Stephen, I would love to, but you know, and I know we could do, and you probably do, webinars on each one of these. And so I think that's what we will do, is kind of take that as a note and note that we do have some past webinars and we will have some future webinars going deep in these areas. But I think for the purpose of this presentation, in order to get through everything that we want to get through, this kind of gives a grounding. So unless there are any specific questions that come up as we go about any one of these areas, let's just move through, and I think we'll kind of like tap into these a little bit more in the examples.
Perfect. Okay. So why e-learning games? Now you know some of the things to be thinking about as you're building them. Well, the first thing is that we think about the fact that as people today, we are easily distracted. We have, you know, numerous devices in our hands at all time, whether your phone's ringing, you're getting text, you're getting a G-chat, you're getting email, your child's coming up to talk to you, or you're on the phone with your boss. We're constantly distracted by things, and the reality is that games, more so than really any other form of training, are an immersive, engaging experience and require a level of active participation. So that's the first one. The second thing is that because they require that attention, that engagement rather, they increase your attention and they increase your focus. And when we're thinking about how we want to train employees, or anybody for that matter, the reality is that we need their attention, we need their focus on the material on a much deeper level. The last thing is that, and I look particularly, obviously, as a human nature, all of us want feedback, but if we think about the millennial generation, that is something that is high on their list of desires. And quite honestly, games are a perfect playground to give ongoing feedback and let someone know how they're doing and how they can do better. And so I think that's really important. The next thing I want to talk about is the value add that games provide versus other forms of training. And there are lots of metrics to look at, but in particular, I think about retention. So according to the National Training Laboratories, as you look on the left-hand side, these traditional forms of training, lectures, articles, videos, demos, discussions, they're driving anywhere from 5 to 50% retention of the information 30 days later. And quite honestly, certainly on the low end, that's a really hard ROI to digest. On the flip side, if you look at something like games, which fall into the practice category, as a result of requiring the person to actually participate actively with the content and practice over and over again, you're seeing a much deeper level of retention of that information 30 days later. So you're going from 5% up to 75%. The neat thing is that some of the tools we'll be talking about are not just ones that you can deploy and have your employees learn from. You can also make them available to them to create their own games as almost a form of teaching them to teach others, right? And if you're going that far, where they're actually constructing the content, the retention level can go up as high as 90% 30 days later. The last thing I want to talk about on this slide, and I think this is one of the data points that is super exciting to me, is thinking about the number of repetitions that are required to actually drive something into someone's brain. And that's one of the reasons that we're showing that practice is obviously so much more successful in driving retention. Well, a recent study showed that while me talking to you or you reading something or you watching a video is ultimately going to require 400 repetitions for it to really stay in your brain, the action of play reduces that volume significantly. And with play, it can go downwards almost of 10 to 20 play experiences or repetitions to actually drive it into your brain. And that really is because play is a form of engagement and activity that is requires full attention. So super exciting stuff. One more data set before we get into showing you some examples of mapping games to different performance objectives. We recently did a study of 1,000 games using the Training Arcade, a tool that we'll be talking about today, and we saw a few things that are important. Games do not need to be long to be effective. So most of our games average about 6 minutes of gameplay per session, and most people are coming back to play, well, not most, on average, people are coming back to play 2.9 times. I often say, as trainers, how often is it that someone comes to us and says, I really love your course, I'd love to take it 2.9 times. This is something that people are doing on their own because of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, and quite honestly, they're enjoying it. And there's nothing more that I think that most of us on this call would like than for people to A, enjoy the content that we build, and B, learn from it. And we're seeing success here. And so the last thing I want to show here is what that success looks like. Using the corrective feedback paradigm, which is basically taking a question and peppering it in and seeing when somebody gets it correct, fantastic. When they get it incorrect, putting it back into the cycle a few questions later. So that's the corrective feedback paradigm, recycling it, if you will. We're seeing a measurable improvement of 64% when it comes to comprehension of the material. And that's critical, right? We're seeing that they're spending little time, 6 minutes, they're coming back and playing upwards of 3 times, and they're getting a much better level of comprehension, ultimately retention as a result. So I'm gonna show you this eye chart, but we're gonna dig into this on a much deeper level. People often say, okay, that's great that there's lots of different types of games out there. How do I know what game to use to align with my performance objective? And we're going to go through all of these, but I wanted to really start by thinking about what are some of those objectives, right? So recall, categorization, empathizing with people, synchronizing different information, so synthesis of a situation, visualizing. These are all different things you might want people to be better at. We're going to talk about how to use games accordingly. Chris, I'm going to jump over to you to talk a little about Bloom's taxonomy, and we'll start some mapping together, if that sounds good.
Sure. And yes, so that was quite a whirlwind tour. And if you have questions, please go ahead and put them in. Some of them I think we will get to as we naturally as we dig into the interactions here, or the various game play that we're going to be exploring here. How many of you out there are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy? If you could either raise your hand or put something in the questions panel and let us know. What degree of familiarity do we have in the audience of Bloom's? Andrew, do we have any feedback on that?
Only a couple hundred. Let's see, they're still coming in. We got a couple very familiars, extremely familiars, 50% familiars. One or two, I'm not sure. I don't know anything about Bloom, so maybe a short refresher. But
good. So that'll be good. We won't belabor it because there's a lot of opportunities, and I'll have a link on the next slide. We can make sure to get it to you in the follow-up as well, where you can really dig in. But Bloom's taxonomy is, when you're writing learning objectives, we look at this a lot of times. It's a classification of or a reference to help us figure out what our goals are for the learning that we're going to be giving. So we use the taxonomy, which is a classification system, and it helps us think about different actions or verbs that need to take place to get different outcomes in our learning. They're basically verbs that tie to cognition or the way we think. And then by changing in behavior and thinking, we hope to get different outcomes. And Bloom's is a guide. So when instructional designers, traditional instructional designers, are writing assessments or tests, and we're planning curricula, we're looking at Bloom's as kind of a cheat sheet, if you will, to say, if I want people to be doing this kind of a behavior, what kind of things do we need them to be thinking about, or what type of thinking do we need to mold? And then what kind of actions will demonstrate that kind of learning? So if you start thinking about that and breaking that down, what we're talking about in relation to gameplay, oh, Stephen, you're awesome. What we're thinking about in relation to gameplay is that we're going to be doing that when we're thinking about each game, and thinking about what is the play that the people are doing, that our learners are doing. What kind of thinking is going on as they are playing, and how does that map to the outcomes that we want, or the behaviors we need to change, or the actions that we need them to demonstrate at the end. It's the exact same kind of thinking, but in relation to not just our quizzing and assessment, not just our curriculum and what we're telling them, but also in practice and feedback, as Stephen mentioned, and then also in repetition, which is practice and feedback, is repetition, right? So when we look at Bloom's, how it works is we start at level 1, and there's a logic that kind of scaffolds in Bloom's. So level 1, we're saying before somebody can understand something, they have to be able to remember it. Then before they can apply it, they need to be able to understand it. Before they can analyze something, they have to be able to perform application, and so on up the chart. It's not that the lowest level remembering is the we sometimes talk about it as instructional designers as that's just level 1. That's just level 1. It's not as valuable as the others. And really, I want us to think about that a little bit differently. I think that happens. The reason level 1 gets a bum rap is because it's so easy to do in e-learning. And so it is over-focused and overdone. And a lot of e-learning and some of our games never really tap into the value of level 1 or go beyond level 1. But level 1 is critical to everything else, because we have to know and then understand before we can apply. So in order for us to get to that higher level of learning, there are some games that we can use at level 1 to kind of build that foundation. Stephen, why don't you show us some of those?
Sure. So we have 3 that we're going to go through, and there are tons out there. Jeopardy is a really good one. Obviously, it's one that I think a lot of people have either done homegrown versions of as trainers. We offer it through the Training Arcade. And what I love about Jeopardy is that it is a game that everyone knows from the from the classic IP on TV, but it also allows you to really draw a dialogue and draw a a very concrete agenda through your training and keep people engaged along the way. With this game, you can put pre-roll video and images and teach people. Then you can test people with multiple choice or text input. Then you can follow up with really concrete feedback in the form of correct and incorrect feedback and advanced feedback with more information. And I think that's really important because it allows you to teach and assess. There are other games, there's other games like Jump. If you haven't seen that, also in the training arcade worth looking at, it's Endless Jumper, and this is more gamey, right? So this ultimately is more about climbing to new heights, jumping as far as you can, avoiding obstacles, trying to target boosts, but answering questions along the way. While Jeopardy, we talked about 2 different question types, so your multiple choice and text input. You also can do multi-select, image match, even do some polling in here, and it's a great way to have truly fun gameplay with questions peppered throughout. But once again, testing people's recall and information. This game, by the way, is a good example. As I mentioned, the stats of people playing 2.9 times. This way over indexes that in our games, and we see people playing 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times because it has a level of addiction to it, which is great because with your information peppered throughout, you're drilling in the information much deeper into people's minds. The last one is trivia, and once again, I imagine many people on this call have built trivia games, but they're great in the form that you can use all those same question types, multiple choice, multi-select, image match, text input, polling, but you can also start to pepper in some of the more gamey things that you wouldn't get in your traditional quiz, right? So you're gonna have your point system, you're gonna have your streak system, which is how many times does someone answer something correct in a row. You're gonna have your leaderboards, you're gonna have your feedback loops along the way. And I think that's where it starts to play on someone's intrinsic motivation, and quite honestly with leaderboards, extrinsic motivation as well, which you can tie into prizes. So, when you think of recall, yes, it is number 1 on the chart that Chris just showed you, but it can be a fun and quite honestly very engaging experience when done correct.
So Stephen, can you talk to us a little bit about, I see you have the Jeopardy logo up there, and why is it that the game agency can use Jeopardy IP? And then talk to us a little bit about the live play aspect and how that might be used in learning as well.
Okay, great. So Jeopardy and the Training Arcade, or the game agency, partnered up about 1.5 years ago. We have exclusive rights within the training industry today for using the Jeopardy brand. We built this with Sony Productions and Jeopardy Productions, and really exciting because it utilizes the voiceover of Johnny Gilbert, who's on the show. It has a pretty high production value that you wouldn't be able to get in most training games out there. And we've taken it to new heights, to Chris's question, especially a few months ago when we saw this pandemic coming down and we saw so many things moving on to e-learning and quite honestly just online meetings. We have what's called online group play today, and we've had this for several months now, where I can launch a game and whether it is 20 people or 200 people can log on simultaneously and play along. And what I love about it is we are seeing real time a much higher level of engagement. So I might say, hey, Chris, great job. I see you're the first person to answer that, and you answered it correctly. And you answered within 2 seconds. Why don't you pick the next category? Chris will give me the next category. We can also at any time push up leaderboards. We can also push out advanced feedback, and we can use this opportunity to real-time see 30% of the people in this room or in this online room got this correct. That leaves 70% who really need a reset on why this particular information is important. So it's a great opportunity to not only engage people, but to use it as a tool to assess what people know and to reset their knowledge really quickly.
So when you say leaderboards, describe to us what a leaderboard is.
So a leaderboard is something that you can put up in some cases throughout a game, or certainly will show up at the end of the game showcasing everyone who played or everyone who registered, and it could have our names, it could have our initials, but it's much like when we back in the day used to play in the arcade and would see, gosh, did I get to the top 10 or did I get to the top 50? And you see where you rank in comparison to others. And what I love about that is it really pulls on someone's intrinsic motivations. I want to be the best I can be. And I realize there are 83 people ahead of me. So I'm going to do it again and again until I can get there. And that is fantastic from a training perspective because it is basically encouraging them to digest your content and prove their knowledge over and over again.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I've gotten the opportunity to participate in a couple of these live sessions with my peers, and besides just the recall standpoint and the game standpoint of it, it was a really wonderful team building opportunity to be able to play. And in other situations, I've seen games like this used to tap into the competitive nature of certain groups, especially salespeople tend to be very competitive by nature. And so I've seen these used in sales events and other opportunities to tap into that and drive engagement with the learning, because it's one thing to say you have to learn this by here, and it's another thing to say, okay, you guys, now you're all going to be competing, and sometimes there's a real prize at the end, sometimes there's a certificate, sometimes there's just bragging rights, but just an opportunity to get everybody in. So then that goes into that mechanics of gameplay again, right?
Absolutely. And by the way, one thing to say, I would suggest think about using some of these games. Certainly the online group play has Jeopardy and Trivia are great games, not just for learning, but they're great games for meeting facilitation. You know, it can change the tone of your meeting, and it can make it a lot more fun level, certainly a much higher level of engagement, and it can make it giddy. And quite honestly, I think all of us kind of need that right now. We've made sure that these games tie into whether you're using GoToMeeting or Google Hangouts or WebEx or BlueJeans. It ties into pretty much any web conferencing tool out there. So I would encourage you to play around with it, and use it not just for training, but for just having really effective meetings with your colleagues.
Well, and then those icebreakers that we always used to do in the classroom, now that we're not getting in the classroom, we have to have other ways to do icebreakers. So, yeah. Yep, awesome. All right, so not to belabor that one, but it is important because, again, back to my previous point, level 1 is not lesser. Level 1 is foundational. And then as we move into level 2, now we're taking the base knowledge and we're building on it. And we're saying, can you explain these ideas? Can you demonstrate your knowledge in some simple ways by categorizing what you've learned, by describing what you've learned to others? This helps you engage with the information that now you know, and then helps you clarify it and building on what you've learned, and it cements that knowledge, building those synapses that Stephen referred to earlier. So can you show us a little bit now what that looks like, Stephen?
Yeah, so we have 2 examples here. The first one is a word scramble game, right? So if you think about Wheel of Fortune without the wheel, it's ultimately about thinking about a concept and spelling it out letter by letter or word by word. And quite honestly, this can be used for lots of different types of topics. The example I happen to be showing here is on cybersecurity and hacking and understanding that and being able to really talk through the topic. So you basically would be taking these one by one and putting them into the right order. Security hacker attacks occur every 39 seconds. And quite honestly, making someone spell out that concept or identify the right word to complete a concept really cements that information into their head. So I love that because it could be about something like IT security. It could be something about your product. It could be about your competitive environment. It could be about your culture. But ultimately, it's about having someone truly describe on their own or complete a sentence on their own and showcasing the fact that they understand that information. The second one that falls into this group really categorizing and ordering. And so the example I'm going to show you here is sort it. And sort it is about dragging and dropping from your image or word bank, which is up here and up here, into the right column and into the right order. So two very different examples. One on the left happens to be showing thermal burn treatments, right? So is it a first, second, or third degree burn? Identifying which image is appropriate for that. What is the appropriate treatment? Do you need to cool it? Don't cool it. Do you need to protect it? Don't protect it. Do you need to call for medical assistance, or don't do that? So I think these are all important things. On the flip side over here, we have meal preparation. So just thinking about fast food companies that are using this tool and thinking about looking at the different menu items, looking at what ingredients fall into what menu items and what order you should be putting them into together just for preparation. And so this is just about sorting. It's about categorizing and putting it into the right order. It's great for these examples, also really great for process. These are simple but effective tools, and they all, both these utilize the same thing. They utilize time. You can put on timers. They utilize streaks to show that you've gotten things correct over and over again. They utilize point systems. They utilize leaderboards. It's about displaying that you understand something, but also getting that positive feedback along the way.
And it's also about practice and repetition, right? So if you have to do things in a certain order at the moment that you need to do them, you want to make sure that your learner has an opportunity to do that. Sometimes we say it takes 5 times to make a habit, or it takes 7 times, takes 4 times, whatever the number is, it's more than one. And so the idea of the game is to give them a safe environment where they can do that more than one time, so that when they're faced with it in the moment, that they already have that practice down and they don't have to think about it. It's just that muscle memory, or that logical sequence is already cemented in there.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. That's great.
Well, you kind of did. I just reinforced it. So. You always say it better, Stephen. I just reinforced it. I said it different. So level 4, we're moving into level 4. So now we're moving up in the higher level of cognitive thinking, right? We're moving from knowing, and now we're really getting deeper into doing and demonstrating. We're moving from learning higher into actual performance. And then we're doing that by starting to tap into decision making, comparing, contrasting, and trying to engage the brain, and not just, do I know this, but now can I begin to do something with that knowledge?
So this is a new game that we are launching in the training arcade. It's called Detective, and I think this is one of the best examples of that. In this game, it's great for understanding whether a patient has a particular needs to be diagnosed with a particular disease, or looking at a business school case study and understanding, what is the root cause of this particular issue in my company. So I'm just going to go through these screens to give you examples. In all cases, you are given the case, right? The case could be some background information on some of the characters. It could be on the business. It could be on the scenario that has happened that's led up to this situation. And then you're given, some of the little more information on the factors, the lineup, right, behind it. Who are the different characters and how are they impacting certain things? And the next thing you're asked to do is you're asked to start to take links and say, well, this person or this situation or this disease links to this particular information over here. So you're starting to almost diagnose or deduct some key links, if you will, of information. You're starting to do some detective work, right? And ultimately, the goal is to understand what is driving certain outcomes. And you're going to see really a wrap up of, yes, this is linked to this. This is linked to this. This is linked to this, and you're able to understand what is actually driving what's happening within your company. It requires a lot more detective work, a lot more identifying. It certainly requires a level of brain work, and What I like about this is a few things. One is this could be done very effectively on your own, but it can equally be done in a group setting. And one of the things we're seeing is classrooms, certainly executive training classrooms have been using this to get their management teams working together on big problems within their companies. We've recently started working with Harvard Business School and USC Business School to start to take some of their traditional case studies and put them into this format to be used in business school classrooms to have people working together. It's a great tool, as is actually the next game I'm going to show you, great tool to have people working together and thinking through this and having conversation. And this, by the way, is just as effective, in my opinion, done in a classroom around a table, as well in an online setting where it's a breakout room, people working together. So lots that can be done here.
Yeah, this is, I think, one of these cases where we're moving from games that support learning into games where the game and the play is the learning, and the learning is taking place actually as part of play, and experimenting with different thought processes. These are the kind of games where, depending on the situation, you might start seeing people taking wrong choices just to see what happens.
Yeah.
But usually after they do it the right way, because they want to, if they know they're being scored or something, right? And then, but yeah.
Well, it's a form of experiment, which is great. And by the way, I'm just going back to that survey we had earlier. I hope the person who asked, who was part of the 2% who asked about easy tools to build this stuff, all these examples I'm providing are from the Training Arcade, and all of them, you can build in 30 to 60 minutes each. They are templates that are built out with the ability for you to put in, as long as you've written your questions and formulated who your characters are and stuff like that, you can build it in our tool very quickly and very efficiently. So and what's really neat is, to Chris's point, this can be in some of the earlier examples a 5-minute experience, or it can be a half-a-day experience using something like this. So it really can be an assessment tool or a training tool, training and assessment tool.
Yeah, I've seen examples in my past life when I used to do client work where workshops would be structured around something like this, where there'd be some basic learning given at the beginning to level set everybody, sometimes even in an e-learning standpoint prior to showing up. Then groups are formed and they work on certain assignments and they interact with the simulation that's presented through the game, and then they have discussion and talk about the learning afterwards to kind of close it and provide the context and do it. So it provides a lot of different opportunity for really high level of learning to take place. So, and those were multiple 6-figure custom simulations. So this is certainly a way now that's really exciting to get everybody to be able to do something like this.
You can build these for low 4-figure, so which is really nice. So if you're building yourself, or you can certainly work with a consultancy to do it for you. But we've tried to take some of the very tools that are out there and simplify them and make them a much quicker, more user-friendly experience to build and certainly to play.
Now, maybe I zoned out a little bit, but did you guys skip level 3?
We are just not addressing level 3 today. That will be a whole different webinar. So
yes.
we're done 4 and we're up to 5. So.
All right,
yes.
Excellent.
I should have told you that you zoned out. Okay, yeah.
You must have fallen asleep.
All right, Chris.
Yes, level 5. So now, can we justify that? Can we argue it, defend it? We're getting into deeper critical thinking, tapping into the realm of soft skills now in our application, getting into deeper shaping of behavior, and then making sure that you have the opportunity to think about some of these really difficult situations in a safe environment, so that if you are found yourself under pressure in real life or an emotionally charged situation, that's not the first time that you're experiencing it.
The best example that we have of this, and this is one that I think people historically have tried to build themselves using some of the rapid authoring tools, but have taken them, upwards of 50 or 100 hours to build, is scenarios. And scenarios I love. I'm showing two examples here because in my mind, the probably most important thing is empathizing and those soft skills, whether it is on the sales side, whether it's doctor-patient relations, whether it's management, whether it's negotiations. It's about looking at a particular scenario and a variety of characters and listening to them and empathizing with them and navigating a conversation effectively, right? So on the left-hand side, we've seen a lot of use cases like this. We have an example here where a doctor is working with a patient to really understand and diagnose what's going on and to help them through a medical life journey, right? On the right-hand side, we see a lot of sales use of this, thinking about, in this case, how do I sell a particular medicine or the concept of medicine into a doctor to prescribe to his patients. And those are two very different types of conversations, right? But ultimately, it's about navigating and empathizing and understanding the other characters and driving that discussion in a way that's going to not only hear what they're saying, but make sure they hear what you're saying. And once again, we use points here, we use timers here, we use meters here to really drive a level of feedback so someone knows, am I effectively driving this conversation, or am I going down the wrong path? Also, at any point, someone can look at their history and understand, here's how I tried it last time, maybe I should try it a different way. So this is definitely one of the deeper types of games, and it requires some real thought from a instructional design perspective. But once you've mapped that out, building it's quite easy. And I love these games because I think that as you get closer and closer to real world, this is a very safe practice playground to try out some of those skills.
Yeah, this is like the next best thing to role play, right? And so when we're doing things like a lot of times in HR and in leadership development, we're talking about things like crucial conversations. And so like you mentioned, negotiations, when you're in these high pressure situations where there might be some kind of discomfort, but it really matters. The outcomes really matter. And the only way of getting through that is to experience it over and over again. So scenarios like these, and especially if we can put them in a sort of a gameplay type situation, so that grabs the engagement as opposed to being able to just click and twitch next, click next, click next. That's an opportunity to really get some practice and some feedback. But to your point, it really matters that it be back full circle to the beginning. It has to be realistic. The tone of voice has to be appropriate. The use of the characters and the situations and the settings have to be realistic. People need to be able to see themselves in them. And that means all different kinds of diversity of people need to be able to see themselves, and they have to be appropriate to the culture of the organization. So the two examples that you've given here are really wonderful there, because one of them would fit very well in one type of culture and another would fit very well in a very different culture. And you being in your organization creating the games, you have to know this and kind of be able to navigate that.
Yeah, exactly.
So
okay, Chris, we have about 3 or 4 more slides. I definitely wanted to make sure we talk through these. Hopefully, people got what we at least had set out to do here. Ultimately, there are a few things in my mind that make a learning game effective. One is that it grabs someone's attention. I think that's really critical. It draws them in to try something in a knock on wood, risk-free zone, and hopefully encourages them to do it over and over again. And if they've done that successfully, or if you've done that successfully in creating a game, you're going to drive much greater retention as a result, and comprehension. The next thing I think is important is making sure that when you're building a game, you're choosing a game that truly maps to what you want the outcome to be, right? So it's not just about game for game's sake, but it's making sure that it's the right type of game to accomplish what you want people to get out of it. Chris said earlier on, and I really want to reiterate this, in my mind, games are not most effective when they're just tagged on at the tail end to one's training. In my mind, they are really truly effective when they're either peppered throughout, right? Because then they are constant little pit stops to try out some of the things you just learned, or they are the training, right? There are games like Jeopardy where you can make that be a full session of, let's talk about this. Oh, let's try this. Let's see what people know. Let's compliment this person because they know it, right? Or the scenarios game, or the detective game, which both those are much greater simulations. So as you think about using games, it's not just about mapping them, but how to use them most effectively. And that really goes to the last point is, when done correctly, you're going to get a level of engagement, and you're going to get a level of a higher level of outcome that outpaces really any other form of training out there. It doesn't have to sit on its own. It can complement what you're doing, and quite honestly, often is much more effective when it does. But I think it's important to think about using games thoughtfully. And the reality is that the level of engagement and the level of data you're going to get is just off the charts in comparison to other forms of training. Okay. Chris, do you want to talk a little about some of the tools that people can use to accomplish this?
I don't need to, and we don't have a lot of time. I want to make sure we have time for questions, but I just want to point out that eLearning Brothers and the gaming agency, we're great partners. And if you want to learn anything more about any of the games that are here, we have folks that are happy to help you, give you more information or set you up with demos or anything that you need. Stephen, I want you to be able to get to the next slide, which is the one that we have available. Andrew Townsend has put it as a link for you to download in the chat.
So this is a sneak peek of something that is coming out in just a handful of weeks. We're really excited about this, and we've been in beta with a few very large corporations. But as you think about historically with the Training Arcade, our games have been used in really dozens of the learning management systems and on their own as well. And what ultimately we decided was that the Training Arcade has enhanced a lot of the platforms, but one of the things we wanted to provide was almost that destination that's much more about driving excitement, engagement, and education in one, right? And so we're launching what we're calling arcades, and it has a combination of solo play, I can play on my own, head-to-head where I can play against anyone here, team play where we can kind of bond as groups and play against one another, whether it's by division or geography or whatnot. Lots of learning journeys. So you can set out to accomplish certain things, and as you complete them, you're going to get different achievements and awards and whatnot. Different challenges that either as an administrator I can set, beat the boss challenge or whatnot, or challenges that we can set for each other, almost term-based. Hey, Bob, I just got this score. Can you beat that, right? And then little things like incentives, ongoing spin and wins, where people are hopefully going to be incentivized to come back regularly to get more points. Those points can be used for leaderboard status and ultimately achievements and rewards. So we're really excited about this. We've been beta testing this for now months and months and months with a lot of big companies, and we're going to be rolling this out for general consumption in just a few weeks. And I wanted to kind of just give this hint because if you're interested in something like this, please let us know. Anyone on this at either eLearning Brothers or at the game agency, we're happy to give you more information. So,
awesome. So Chris had mentioned that we'll make that sheet downloadable. I don't have it inside of GoToWebinar. We will send that out as a downloadable in the email with the recording a little bit later. And the reason we chose that particular slide for you to be able to download and hand out, yes, it's cool and it tells you which game, training arcade games to use, but it also tells you where you can use different types of games. So even if you're not going to use training arcade games, it at least will give you ideas of where you can use games in different parts. So we'll get that emailed out to everybody. A couple questions that have come up really quickly. Talk to us about how these games are compatible with LMSs or how they work inside of our current e-learning flow.
Yeah, so we've built all these games to plug and play really easily. So all these games can be exported as SCORM packages. That's one. The next thing another option is you can take it and make it a web object available as part of any of your rapid authoring tools. Another option is you can take it and make it available as an embed code, so it can really sit on any website. We wanted to make sure that they can plug and play really wherever you are. The last thing is mentioning is that if you're using any of the major web conferencing tools, they plug right into that as well. Really easy use for the ones that have online group play. Really easy use for facilitated meetings. So that's really exciting. And the other thing to mention is that we've also made all these available in now 15 languages. So they're really easy to make appropriate for the audience that you have. Hopefully that covers it, and we can always add more. But want to make sure that not only are they available to anywhere, but to hopefully anyone that will be using them.
Excellent. In your experience, what is the sequence in which having games works best? For example, is it reflect, then present info, then play, or is it play, then present info, or reflect, or is it play, present info, play again, reflect, play some more? Where does that stand?
That's a great question. Those are all wrong. No, I'm teasing.
It should just be play. Play, done.
So I am a firm believer that peppering games throughout is great. I don't know if there's one particular order that makes sense. I think it's about what your content is and what the culture is and what the how much time you have. But often, and ironically we didn't do it on this session, but we've done it certainly with eLearning Brothers on previous webinars. Often I will start out a session with a game. And sometimes it's just to assess, right? So we actually kind of did that here, right? We did a few surveys. So we got kind of a starting ground to understand what people wanted or know. And you can do that with gameplay too, right? You can set the stage and have a quick 4 or 5 question trivia game to say, hey, you know what? We just did these 5 things. I noticed that in this room, these 2 items really most people here don't know about it. So let me focus most of my time on that, right? But I also think that games are great to pepper throughout a session. So great example, we support a lot of sales meetings, right? And we see that during those sales meetings, they could be 2 or 3 days long. And this is, of course, pre-COVID, sitting in conference rooms and getting a lot of information thrown at you. Well, it's a great opportunity to say, let's between every session, maybe every hour and a half, let's pepper you with a game where actually each table is playing against each other. And one, you're re-informing people about that information. You're assessing what people know, and then you're using it as an opportunity to follow up with, that observation of where there's knowledge gaps. The last thing is, I think that certainly they're great end caps as well, right? Ultimately, the more that you can use them to reinforce that information and assess people's knowledge and adjust your training real time based on what you see, the more effective it's going to be in educating and ultimately assessing people's knowledge and reinforcing, driving greater retention.
Excellent. We have other questions, but we are out of time. Maybe I'll send some of these questions over to you, Chris and Stephen. We can answer those offline. But thank you, everybody, for coming to our webinar. As you can see there on the screen, you can try the Training Arcade for free. Just give us a call, 801-796-2767, or send us an email, info@elearningbrothers.com. You can learn more about it and even sign up to get your free trial at elearningbrothers.com independently. So please do that if you're just trying out, if you're interested in just trying out these games. Hope this has been useful. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for Chris and Stephen for your information, and we'll see you guys all next time.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.